Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Daniel Thomas, and I'm the Director for Research and Strategic Insights at Government Executive Media Group. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to today's webcast, Business Resiliency in Correctional Facilities, presented by Cisco. Today, we're going to discuss how the COVID-19 pandemic has forever altered the corrections ecosystem, adding a complicated new layer to physical safety considerations and service delivery priorities. From healthcare to family visits, education to parole hearings, corrections leaders are rethinking how to most effectively and efficiently serve the inmate population. During this webcast, we'll explore how justice agencies are leveraging the Internet of Everything to deliver digital services in the midst of the pandemic. And joining us today are two individuals, Matthew Dietz, who is the Director of Information Technology at Elkhart County Government in the state of Indiana. And we're also joined by Daniel Stewart, who is Senior Advisor for State and Local Government at Cisco. Welcome to both of you.
Good to be with you, Daniel.
So thank you for joining us, everybody. Before hearing from our panelists, I'd actually love to start today's event off by polling you, our audience. So Government Business Council recently conducted a pulse check on this topic of corrections justice in partnership with Cisco, and we'd really like to hear from you. So what you're seeing now on the screen is actually a question we fielded to our state and local government audience in recent weeks. And I'll read the question and I invite you to answer. So the question is, to what extent do you agree or disagree with the statement, correctional agencies should be allowed to charge inmates and their families for virtual video visitation? Take some time to answer that. I should mention that while you're answering that, we collected feedback from over 100 state and local government employees, and we'll actually be diving into some of that research today. Give everybody a few more seconds. Okay. So the feedback here is pretty interesting. It looks like, if I'm reading this right, 26% said that they strongly disagree with that statement, that correctional agencies should be allowed to charge for those services. And then another 16% just somewhat disagree. So we're going to look further into that, and we're going to also show you the data that we got back from our entire base of respondents shortly. So thanks everybody for helping kick off today's event. I'd now like to turn things over to Daniel Daniel Stewart for a quick presentation on Cisco Connected Justice. Daniel, I give you the floor.
Thanks, Johnny. I really appreciate it. It's good to be with everybody today. Thank you for joining us. I like that quick poll question at the beginning because that has become a very, a question in a lot of people's minds during the pandemic as considered, against the traditional way in which that business has been operated for some time now. So I'm Daniel Stewart, Senior Advisor for State and Local Government at Cisco, and I am leading the courts, corrections, and post-incarceration elements at Cisco. And it was during the pandemic that Cisco really ended up getting into some motions with our customers that none of us had ever really expected. Who expected a pandemic of this level? But very quickly we were asked to deploy video elements in correctional facilities across the country to execute court hearings, to execute lawyer and client connectivity for medical, for telemedicine, telepsych. Also family visitation. One deployment that we did was a 200 video unit deployment across 8 jails, and to have that up and running for simultaneous calls in under 2 weeks. And we're able to do that. In meeting that need, in meeting that demand from the customer base, it became very apparent to us that we had to find a way to further automate that type of a system and to make it more usable, more deployable with ease into the ecosystem of the corrections field for county jails, detention centers, city jails, and also state prison systems. And we've been doing that. And along the way, we've learned a lot about different elements within corrections that we had not looked at in the past with our customers. It just wasn't the area where we were totally focused in this way. So we are there now, and the customers are really enhancing our ability to bring our product line more into what the corrections field needed and what they desire. So Cisco ended up building the only open standards-based multi-platform interoperable system that can go ahead and bring in all elements of services for inmates inside of facilities across the globe. Actually, this is a global effort that we're leading now. And in doing so, we're able to bring in all of those entities of the courts, of reentry groups, of attorney visits and such, medicine, whatever it may be, and to bring them in on disparate systems, to be able to bring in the multitude of systems in, and to do that. And along the way, certain places stepped up. And when they stepped up big time. So Elkhart County, the CIO, Matt, is with us today, and it was very, very intriguing to go through the process with Elkhart County to learn what it was that they were looking to do, what they wanted to do, what they needed to have, and how Cisco could help them. And Daniel, should I turn it back to you to Matt? You want to do it that way?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that overview. And that really, I think that's a great segue into today's discussion, which let's go ahead and kick it off right now. Matthew, we haven't heard from you, and I'd like for you to, if you could, just tell us a bit more about your role at Elkhart County government and the impact that COVID-19 has had on your organization's operations. And please, when you're answering, we'd really love to hear some specifically about how it has impacted your justice system's operations.
Absolutely. So I am the Director of Information Technology for Elkhart County government. Been here for a couple of years now. And honestly, COVID has impacted us greatly, as I'm assuming it has everyone else, especially on our judicial system. Just to highlight that, simple things that you were able to do beforehand, appear for and dispute a traffic ticket, to really be able to obtain licenses. And honestly, we couldn't, because of COVID when it first kicked off, we couldn't even do our normal hearings. We couldn't allow visitors into our jail or our judicial correctional facility, probation. Instead of them being able to access their counselors and any kind of rehab facilities, they were contained, quarantine in our probation facility. So it really hampered our ability to really service our community and those that were either impacted or were currently incarcerated at the time.
Yeah, and Matthew, I want to hear more from you in a moment. Daniel, you work with correction systems across the country. What are some trends that you've been seeing in terms of service delivery during the pandemic so far?
Yeah, it is interesting. As part of my background, I served 4 governors as the chairman of the State Commission of Correction in New York State, with the oversight over the prisons, county jails, and Rikers Island. And while I was in that position in government, it was really interesting to see the changes that were occurring then, back around 2006, going up through 2012, and just seeing how the acceptance within corrections was changing for technology. And then dramatic changes have happened over the last decade. But during the pandemic, everything changed. And it was the immediate need of all these services. Again, when you have people incarcerated, but you need to decide whether or not they're going to remain incarcerated. Can they have their day in court? Can they have their hearing? Can they get out early? Can we depopulate a jail? Can we socially distance within a jail or a prison? Can we go ahead and isolate, quarantine, and depopulate in a way in which we still deliver the services and the multitude of services that go into these facilities? And these are things that the general public never thinks about, but within the corrections industry, they fully understand what it is, all of these elements that take place, and the movement of inmates, the escorting, the transporting to different places, and all of those types of engagements that take place. So when Cisco was asked to step up to do this, and we built our standards-based scheduler, what we did is we decided we would build a platform that would allow us to interface with the brain center of a jail or a prison system, being its inmate management system. Take that inmate location data And from that, we're able to direct those calls from any of those outside entities that need access and are approved for access to the inmate population. And we can make sure it goes to the video endpoint closest to the individual that is incarcerated. Why do we want to do that? Because we want to limit their movement during a pandemic. You don't want to be escorting people through facilities and spreading potential disease if you don't have to, right? So that's what the ask was from the the ecosystem of justice was, help us with our courts, help us with our corrections, and help us with our post-incarceration as well. And we knew there was 4.5 million people out there on probation and parole in the United States. And under a shelter-in-place order, how do you actually get oversight over those individuals? And we built within all three of those elements, courts, corrections, and post-incarceration, elements of our WebEx platform that could show that ability to have remote reporting on probation and parole, the ability for the courts to be able to still operate on many levels, including with the facilities and also in the corrections facilities, to assure that the process would continue, that they would receive all of the constitutionally mandated elements of services, as well as any others that they could add in there to do that. So having that scheduler base was very important. And then going to somewhere like Elkhart and them saying, well, this is how we're going to use it, and started immediately with the juvenile side doing some visits.
Mm-hmm. So you've got COVID-19 is this incredible transformation. It implies this incredible transformation that's happening in the justice system across the country. But I think what a lot of people probably don't know is that even before COVID-19 upended these operations, many facilities were actually already beginning to incorporate more digital services for inmates and their families. So, Daniel, what have you seen as some of the biggest benefits to emerge from implementing those kinds of virtual options at correctional facilities? And then I'd love to hear from Matt after that.
Yeah, I think that the baseline is this, is the more education you can bring in a facility, the less recidivism. The more family visits you can get into a facility, you will reduce recidivism. The more you can have an individual feel as though when they come back out, there's going to be an opportunity for success, the less recidivism you're going to have. And that incorporates a lot of entities and a lot of services delivery. And I'll let Matt go from there.
Yeah. Matt, you want to take it from there?
So, one of the things that we realized from the get-go is that, especially when it comes to juveniles, when they're currently incarcerated, they don't have access to, some of the tools that we have, including, educational or even mental health support. One of the first things that we really started implementing was visitation right away, because, these are still kids. And their parents may or may not have the means to visit with them. And then when we went to COVID-19 shutdown, their parents weren't even allowed in to just, chat with their kids, which has a huge mental and emotional impact that I don't think people, really understand. Because, when we look at the correctional facility and the judicial system, we usually just kind of encompass everything as violent offenders. But, some of these kids, they came from backgrounds and they've, experienced things that we've never experienced and we've never seen. They don't have the opportunities that we have. And so to help, reduce the recidivism, as Daniel was talking about, we gave them the tools to be able to find the education, find the counseling and the support that they, desperately need. And from my perspective, has been neglected for so long. And now with, the Cisco WebEx system and the platform, we're able to do things such as offer interactive classes, visitation with family members, and they can schedule this time on iPads, on any kind of device. I mean, we use the Cisco Desktop Pros for our visitation, which allows interactivity between the parents and the kids. And it's just one of those, few things that we've started to implement that has really shown a huge return on investment, and just such a positive impact in the community already.
I like when you say return on investment, because in a way this is return to community. It's not just a return for the dollars, let's say, for the county. It's about what happens when folks come home. It's about what happens when the kid comes home. And this has been the long lost, the Osborne Association over in New York State always has great events, and they're a great reentry group. But they always talk about, look, do you want someone who went into that juvenile facility or that jail or that prison, do you want them to come back a better person? If you do, then we have got to find a way in which to invest within in order to give them the tools necessary to come out that better person. Otherwise, you'd get the same person or maybe a worse person back. And I think that's a societal change that has occurred over the last decade or so, is that people don't want people walking out of jail or prison and just breaking the law. They want them to be able to have an opportunity to get back into their community and be more of a, a proactive member within the community, someone who can have a positive impact.
Absolutely.
I like how you all have really fleshed out. There's a real positive, there's a human impact here that extends just beyond that technology. I want to pivot us to talking a little bit about some of the challenges that you might face in implementing digital services at these correctional facilities. Just as context, my research team earlier this month, we polled an audience of state and local government employees, captured feedback from over 100 respondents. And what we found is that when we asked them, we found that 60% were at least moderately confident, moderately, very, or extremely confident that they could transition in-person services to video services. But we also found that 40% were only not at all or slightly confident in that assessment, the ability to transition those services. So with that as a backdrop, what are some of the challenges that you've seen? And Matt, maybe you can take this first, just implementing digital services at correctional facilities.
So one of the biggest challenges that we've seen is really changing the mindset of what implementing, digital services really means. A lot of times when you say that in a correctional facility, a lot of times people think, oh, you're just going to, implement, Netflix and, other video services and these niceties, when really that's not, what we're doing. We're really, utilizing this technology to, enhance the treatment and opportunities individuals have, because as Daniel said, when these individuals get released back into the public, if you're not setting them up for success, failure is a great possibility. And when people fail, then a lot of, crimes and other events happen out of desperation or just frustration. And we don't want that to be the case. So one of the biggest things that we had was maintaining that, everything we did was secure, and wasn't going to be accessible or easily, penetrated from the outside and, from security, reasons. But, once we looked at the WebEx platform and realized the encrypted, end-to-end platform that they had, as well as making sure that all individuals felt safe and secure using this, and really showed that to our legal team, as well as our judicial side and our legislative side, to really show that, hey, this is a safe platform. This is something that is going to be a tool. Most of the individuals who didn't embrace technology before, once they got a taste of the possibilities of it and how secure and controlled it was, they've embraced it greatly. I mean, we've had judges go from not wanting a single piece of technology in the courtroom to telling me if I ever try to take away their, dual 70 WebEx boards, you're going to throw me in jail. So, I mean, it has been a drastic change. And I think a lot of times that's the challenge that people see is change is kind of scary. But with WebEx being so user-friendly, and myself and my staff being able to present this as a helpful additive rather than something that is replacing, the current system, it's been embraced fully and unbelievably, in my opinion.
Mm. Yeah. Go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, I'd say also in that 60-40 split, Daniel, that you talked about, we have to remember pre-COVID, there was real resistance in many ways to do a lot of things by video. And quite honestly, a lot of people don't like to see themselves on video, right? I don't want to see myself on there. And, that has totally changed. And again, to Matt's point, I've seen people all across this country that have transformed themselves as far as adaptation to the technology as a necessity during the lockdown. But now, understanding also, as we come out of this pandemic or go through another phase of it, we have to be prepared for that at-home work. We have to be prepared for that, services delivery remotely. The more we do that, the more I think that government itself is going to realize that it can have savings and it can do things differently than we ever thought would have happened before. It's already happening in the private sector. Look at the amount of people in the private sector working from home now. Do you think that all of those businesses are going to bring everybody back into those high rises? I don't think so. I don't think those towers in different cities are going to be filled up the way they once were, because there is an added element to at-home work. So the pandemic will cause this transition to occur, right? Transition occurs. But the delivery of the services, there are elements that are extremely important to the success of the justice system. Justice can't stop because a pandemic happened. Justice doesn't stop when a blizzard hits. It doesn't stop when a hurricane or a tornado comes through. It may be impeded for a period of time, but it has to get back up and going. The thing is now is that because it was a pandemic, any entity that has gone to this type of remote capability will have that initial reaction in the future of, we know how to do this. We know how to get back into this and to run it that way. That is the unfortunate reality of the benefit learned through the pandemic, is that we do have a way to respond to things. And now we've been through one of the worst possible scenarios. We will be better at this as we go forward.
Yeah, and on top of what Daniel said, and if I can jump in, the cost savings that we've already seen in just a 6-month span has been great. We're no longer having to transport certain offenders to different courthouses, which requires more security. So now we are securing our facilities in a much better way. We're reducing costs and we're having hearings that we're usually taking days to get through 4 or 5. Now we're running through these 10 to 12, and it also it saves money not just from a county perspective, but from our citizens as well. Instead of now having to miss a full day of work to show up for a 20-minute hearing on a traffic ticket, or if you're involved in drug court, now people are able to take a 15-minute break at work, jump on WebEx with their phone, have their hearing, and go right back to work. And so now it's not such a life-changing, altering event that now they have to reconstruct their entire day around. Now it's becoming more of a service to our citizens and allowing them to continue their day as normal, but also appear in court and have that one-on-one discussion with the judges, which I think is just greatly misunderstood at this point. How obtrusive the judicial system can be in our citizens' lives, and how we are making this easier is amazing, and it's also cost saving to our citizens, whether we realize it yet or not. So I think that's a big point to hit on there as well.
Yeah, I found in 25 years of government service, federal, state, and local, that the military always led with technology because they have to, but the rest of government usually lagged behind the private sector. Private sector was quick, nimble, they can move quicker. Government has to be that today. And because of the pandemic, government has been forced to go into that mode. And because when government does it and can do it right, it'll be a good way for them to move forward. So, what we used to do at home and then go to work and say, why couldn't we do this here? Well, now it's being done there.
Absolutely.
Now it's being done. So with that, I think that's the whole change, whether it be corrections, courts, post-incarceration programs, drug courts, as Matt just alluded to, all of those things. Again, if we're going to have a system that changes people's lives for the better, that has now been created. It has been created through this pandemic with the realization that we have got to be better at what we do to have a better person come out of those walls. And if we can do that and give those folks a chance, that lowers the crime rate in an area. Matt comes from a county. I didn't know that you were the RV capital of the world, Matt. I didn't know that.
That's correct.
But I also know that you're trying to build an economic zone there. And in Elkhart County, if you're going to build an economic zone, it better be a safe place.
Yep.
If a company's going to go there, if people want to take their family there, it better be a safe place. And I think the county's making a wise strategic decision to assure that their judicial system is in order to make sure that they have that safe place that people want to live, work, and play in. That's the important piece here.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, in our last few minutes, I want us to look even beyond the current situation, the pandemic, to look further at what is on the horizon for digital services at correctional facilities. One finding we got back in our poll is that 58% of respondents said that they considered their state justice system to be either unsustainable or very unsustainable. 58%. That's pretty troubling. And when we're talking about sustainability, we're talking about the number of rehabilitated inmates, talking about low recidivism rates, as you all have mentioned, efficient use of taxpayer funds. So in rounding out our discussion, what are some actionable feedback, some steps that leaders can take now to prepare themselves to be more resilient in the future? Daniel, you want to start with that?
Yeah, it's basically what I've been saying. You know, government has to change because of the pandemic. It's changing, and because of that, maybe that number can be turned around. Maybe people can have a little more faith that their government is being able to do these things, deliver services, and to do it in a way in which it's going to be a positive effect on the community. But let's go to Matt and get the community response. He's on the ground. He's feet on the street.
So I think, you know, what is upcoming, you know, from a technological perspective in our judicial system as well as our correctional facilities is, you know, again, I keep hitting on this, is providing more tools for individuals to improve their life outside of the correctional facility when they are released. One of the things that I suggest that, you know, people do when they're looking at implementing any of these changes is, you know, look at the needs. You know, the needs right now are making sure that we can function as normal. That's an easy thing to, I believe, solve, because in the correctional facility, you know, the easy answer is, oh, we'll just, you know, limit the amount of exposure these people get. But I think, you know, a lot of the facilities have programs already that now, with everyone, you know, being so constrained, they don't have access to, or they're filling up quickly. So now we looked at, okay, here's a need. We need to give our current offenders the ability to rehabilitate themselves, to have resources such as drug counseling, instead of just saying, oh, you know, do your time and then you're going to get out. You know, the other thing that we're doing is we're also letting them schedule interviews for potential jobs before they get out. They're able to set up the ability to locate and lock down housing, so they can have all these things ready by the time they get out. And I think that is such a massive first step forward for people, because instead of being released, say, you know, after a year, I'm sorry, but in 1 year's time, the world is a very different place. I mean, if you look at technology, if you're incarcerated in a year and you don't have the access to tools to get caught up on how systems are working now, when you get out into the workforce, you're already behind. And when you're already behind, you become frustrated. When you become frustrated, you fall back into old habits. So now we're trying to change all that by giving them a leg up and having them put the first foot forward being a positive one rather than being something negative. So I urge and encourage everyone, you know, that is looking at systems like this to really identify shortcomings and not look at it as a negative aspect, to say, oh, we haven't been doing this right. Look at it and say, what is out there that we can be implementing, and see what is being done and what is not being done at your facility, and then trying to implement that. Because I'm telling you, the technology isn't as expensive or difficult to implement, and the reception that you get from not only the county staff perspective, but also from the offenders, it is fantastic. I mean, they embrace it fully. They will work with you. They will be the first ones in line to sign up for classes. And thank you for giving them those opportunities. So I can't hit on that enough, is that if you provide the tools, these individuals will fully take advantage of them. And it will just be a tremendous positive first step forward as they get released back into the community.
Both of you gentlemen, Daniel, thank you for providing your industry perspective and partnership there. Matthew, I love the youth cases you cited, and just hearing your perspective from being there on the ground and in the trenches is something that I think really resonates with our audience today. We could honestly spend another hour, 2 hours talking on this subject. It's fascinating, but unfortunately, we have reached the end of our time here today. And this digital event has been recorded and will be available on demand in the near future on the GovExec site. But I just want to thank our panelists, Matthew and Daniel, for joining us today, and to let our audience know to be on the lookout for GBC's flash poll to be published soon with those results. Thank you all so much for your time today.
Thanks, Dan.